Let me describe a character from Persona 4 and see if you can guess who I'm talking about. This character wants to be loved and accepted, but didn't fit in as themselves, so they changed who they are to fit in with societal standards and become someone different. Now, who am I talking about? Kanji Tatsumi? Rise Kujikawa? Naoto Shirogane? All of what I said is true for those characters, but I'm actually talking about Teddie. And that's because Teddie is by far the most misunderstood character of Persona. There's this misconception that Teddie is a pervert, a sexual predator, if you will. And it's very easy to fall under this trap if one looks at it through the lens of human standards. But Teddie isn't human. He doesn't understand human concepts like other people do, and that's why he behaves the way he does. However, fans who don't like him have this idea of Teddie where he's malicious, saying that he knows what he's doing, and he shouldn't exist in Persona 4. And that upsets me because he's probably the most important character in the game that matches the theme of reaching out to the truth. I want to set the record straight and inform people that Teddie is not a pervert. He is not malicious, and he most certainly deserves to exist in Persona 4. So here's my defense of Teddie, the most misunderstood Persona character. The most common misconception that Teddie has against him is his frequent use of the term scoring. As most people know it, the term scoring, as defined by the Cambridge Dictionary, is a slang term that means to have sex with someone that you have usually just met. This is the definition used when referring to how Shadow Yukiko uses it. But the issue is, there's this adamant belief that this definition is what Teddie thinks of when he uses it. That's not the case. When he first hears the term, he doesn't know what it means.
I mean, Yukiko saying stuff like score myself a hot stud. Oh, that's not like her at all.
Score? Stud? So, what's this scoring with a hot stud thing?
So, if he's never heard of the term up until that point, what definition does he take away from the term? Well, pay attention to this clip of how he picks up the term when he learns it from Shadow Yukiko.
My, it's getting crowded here. Why don't you and I go somewhere else? A land far, far away where no one knows me. If you're my prince, you'd take me there, won't you? Come on, pretty please?
Oh, is this scoring a hot stud?
Shadow Yukiko wants a prince to rely on, and when Teddie hears this, this is what clicks in his head. Scoring means bonding with someone. Looking at it through the lens of Teddie, this is consistent with the theme of what he wants: affection. Teddie has been in the TV world for who knows how long, and without any meaningful connection to others, he forms a shape that he thought people would love, hence why he looks like a mascot bear. We know this later on when he explores that side of himself and discovers who he really is, a shadow that wants friends. But at this point in the game, when he first hears about scoring, he isn't aware of how to define what he wants, hence why he copies the phrase from Shadow Yukiko later in the same scene.
My, it's getting crowded here. Why don't you and I go somewhere else? Come on, pretty please?
From then on, he uses the phrase scoring as his way of saying he wants to bond with others. But how do we know that how he's using the phrase is not the same as how other people define it? It's more apparent in the Japanese version of the game, which will be talked about in a bit, but there is proof. In Persona 4 Arena, the original one, not Ultimax, if you have Teddie defeat Yukiko in a match, this is what he says.
Hey Yuki-chan, how'd you like my scoring with you, huh? Huh? That isn't what scoring means?
He really thought that playing around with Yukiko is scoring, which is a much more innocent look into how he thinks. This is proof of two things. One, he still doesn't know what scoring actually means even after the end of the game. And two, no one corrected him about the actual definition of scoring. That's why he continues to use the phrase as he does. So the question is, why does no one correct him about how to use the phrase? Well, remember that the investigation team consists of teenagers who are all exploring themselves in their own right. None of them have really sorted out who they are just yet. It's not unusual to think they'd be uncomfortable with talking to Teddie about his misconception, because that would mean talking to him about the concept of sexual intercourse. That doesn't make anyone a bad person, but it's not Teddie's fault that his first exposure to the human world is based on what he saw from the shadow selves of Yukiko, Kanji, and Rise. So that's that then. Teddie doesn't understand scoring, and that means this part of the video is over, right? What if I told you that this was actually mistranslated from the Japanese version?
だいたいあのユキコが逆なんとかってありえないっつの。逆なん?
Instead of scoring, the phrase used here is gyaknan. I could just show you the translation and say, women picking up men on the street, but I'll read this paragraph from Koto Academy so it doesn't seem like I'm making up the translation. Just a quick search on the internet, you'll be quick to see how much the Japanese youth love wandering about to invite someone on a date or even seduce them. You will also find that young Japanese people also tend to try their luck along the streets of Tokyo at night, attracting girls' attention with pickup lines. This type of flirtation is called, in the Japanese slang, would be known as nanpassuru for men and gyaknansuru for women. In other words, gyaknan is referring to women picking up guys specifically. The other way around, men picking up girls, already has a term for it. The English version of the game actually has an equivalent to gyaknan, and that would be stud hunting, which for some reason the game doesn't use in place of scoring. So why is this important? It's important because in the Japanese version of Persona 4, Teddie, known as Kuma over there, uses the phrase gyaknan to refer to what he wants to do with Chie, Yukiko, and etc. What Teddie actually means when he wants to gyaknan with someone is, please flirt with me, or please take me out on a date. Suddenly, this changes a lot about what Teddie's intentions are. Instead of a sex pest that many label him to be, his intentions are far purer than wanting to have sex at all. Teddie just wants to bond with others, even if the term he's using is not the correct way to put it. This shows that he's mimicking the others around him to fit in with the group to the best of his ability, and this further reinforces the idea that Teddie is mentally childlike. He's naive, not malicious. And if this were the only misconception about Teddie, I could have ended the video here. But there's other misconceptions about him that we need to address. It's true that Teddie flirts with the girls, but that doesn't mean he does it to everyone. A common misconception about Teddie is that he flirts with Nanako. This is simply not true, and there's evidence to back it up. When this claim is made, this scene is referred to as proof that Teddie flirts with Nanako.
Hey there, little lady. Wanna launch some fireworks of love with me?
How do you do that?
Well,
Even though he's saying fireworks of love, that's not Teddie flirting. He's playing around with her. Take a look at the Japanese version.
はーい、お嬢さん。よかったら、僕と愛の花火を打ち上げてみない？
While Teddie still mentions fireworks of love, notice how he uses the term
お嬢さん。
This is a term used to refer to women of upper status, in terms of wealth or nobility. But this is a term almost exclusively used in anime and manga. Most friends do not refer to each other as
お嬢さん。
unless they were being mean or sarcastic. Because this is another case of the Japanese version not translating well into the English version, Teddie isn't flirting with Nanako. He's playfully calling her a young lady. Still don't believe me? Take a look at how he speaks about Nanako in the dungeon exchange with Chie. Teddie doesn't see Nanako the same way that he sees the other girls. It's apparent from their exchanges with each other too.
Are you going somewhere?
Yep, the guys kept their promise.
A promise, huh? What if you made a promise with me? Could you stay then?
A promise with Nana-chan?
A promise that you'll play with me. How about that?
Nana-chan, guess what I have? Ta-da! A Christmas present for you!
Oh, it looks just like you.
I wish I could have made it look better, but I thought it'd keep you company at the hospital, Nana-chan. Oh, and it's made from 100% pure teddy fur. I'm a guy who's all about using all natural materials.
In those scenes, Teddie did not mention scoring once when he would normally mention scoring to girls he likes. This is because Teddie's mentality is similar to Nanako, a naive child. When he's seen at Juness, he's seen playing around with other kids because of how he thinks. Knowing this, Teddie has an easier time bonding with Nanako than the girls. He doesn't feel the need to mention scoring because he already has what he wants from Nanako: to bond with someone, to play with them, and ultimately be happy. He may not have been in the human world for long, but even he knows how young Nanako is.
Nana-chan's still small, so her other self didn't appear like everyone else.
So the scene with the fireworks of love from earlier is not flirting. In the Japanese version, Teddie, or rather Kuma, has a verbal tick where he ends his sentences with Kuma, like your typical mascot character. Unfortunately, verbal tics like this are near impossible to translate properly in English, so the closest substitute we have is Teddie making bear puns. While this is in character for him, this doesn't fully translate who he truly is. I promise, this is important for later, but the point is, because of how the Japanese language works, his sense of humor didn't exactly carry over properly in English. Take a look at this scene in particular.
Huh. So this is a strip joint, huh?
Strip? Ah, I know what that is. It's the thing zebras have, right?
Oh.
Strip. Like a zebra, right? Right?
It's so bright here. Even with the glasses on, my eyes hurt.
Doesn't anyone get the joke? Okay, let's try one more time. Strip. It's something zebras have, huh?
Can anyone shut this thing up?
Huh? Zebra? Sorry, what are we talking about?
I won't say it again. Let's hurry on.
From this scene, you'd think Teddie was trying to make a joke based on a strip pun, which is cheesy in its own right, and it sounds like the others are not amused by the pun. But this scene is much different in the Japanese version.
ストリップってやつっすか？
ストリップ？ははー、読めたクマよ。しましまのやつクマね。
あ
ストリップってしましまのやつクマね。
ここ眩しい。メガネしてても目が痛くなりそう。
ねえ、ボケたら突っ込みなさいよ。もう一回クマ、ストリップってしましまのやつ。
うっさいなこいつ。え？しましまって？ごめん、何の話？
もう言わないクマ。早く先に進もうクマ。
Notice how Teddie mentions bokeh and tsukomi here. Bokeh and tsukomi are terms used in a Japanese routine called manzai. For those of you who don't know what manzai is, here's an excerpt from Japan Switch. Otherwise known as bokeh and tsukomi routine, manzai is the country's wackier take on straight man and wise guy duo. It has all the premise of an oft-recurring trope in comedy. There's the stock character who retorts with deadpan, stodgy lines against their partner's insufferable jokes and wacky puns. They don't get to be the jokester, but it's precisely their impeccable timing on delivering the punchline that makes their banters thrilling and leaves the audience demanding more. To put it simply, it's a routine where someone makes snide remarks at a joke told by a wise guy or the idiot. That means in the Japanese version, Teddie was actually trying to start a manzai routine with the investigation team. He intentionally made himself to be the idiot so someone can correct him and play along with his routine. The actual reason why the others react the way they do is because any sort of response would be playing along with the routine. So the only way to shut this down is to ignore it and not play along at all. So why is this important? It's important because that makes Teddie's sense of humor far sharper than it actually is in the English version. The joke isn't that he made a bad pun. The joke is that he made a bad joke and wants someone to play along and be a straight man. In other words, someone to bond with and play around with. Now there is a scene I didn't mention yet, and that's this scene.
Hey, Teddie, watch the hands, pal!
Aw, don't be so stingy. I think we're due for a wardrobe malfunction.
Am I going to chalk up this scene as a translation error as well?
ちょ、クマ！どこ触ってんだっつの！
ケチケチクマね。豪快にポロリと。
Well, no. But I will say, he did get the idea of a wardrobe malfunction from someone. If what I'm saying up until now is true, then that means this idea was planted in his head, directly or indirectly. But surely there's no evidence of that, right?
Right? When you think of the summer, you think of the beach, and vice versa. I'm sure suntan skin and a little accidental hand slipping is in our future.
Okay, let's talk about Yosuke Hanamura for a moment. Now, let me preface this by saying, I love Yosuke's character. He's probably one of the most well-written magician arcanas and bro characters in the Persona series. That doesn't mean he's the best influence on Teddie, however. Yosuke is a teenager, which means he has teenager tendencies. And Yosuke doesn't really do a good job of hiding that.
It was her, no doubt about it. Her curves, her posture, even her beautiful slim legs.
What's that look for?
When you combine the shadow selves that Teddie saw in the TV world with Yosuke's tendencies, it's no wonder Teddie has a warped view on the older girls of the human world. In fact, we find out in Persona 4 Arena that Teddie lives in Yosuke's closet, and that also means we get a view of Yosuke's room. Taking a look at Yosuke's room, we can see that he listens to Nickelback? What? We can see that Yosuke has a bunch of posters of girls in revealing swimsuits. Combine this with the knowledge that Yosuke has magazines that he doesn't want his parents to see, it's clear that Yosuke likes girls in your typical teenager fashion. However, this also means that all of this libido will rub off on naive Teddie. This is implied to be where Teddie gets his ideas. In fact, sometimes he encourages those ideas.
Ooh! First place in the shortest legs division is... Huh, who would have guessed?
It's not me, is it? Hey, what kind of things did they examine anyway? Look, if you're gonna blab at all, you might as well tell us the girls' measurements.
So Teddie's warped idea of what the human world is has been further warped by Yosuke's influence on him. And the reason why he doesn't correct Teddie on any of this is because of the same reason the others won't correct him on scoring. It's embarrassing to talk about. But one has to understand, if you don't correct someone on why it's not okay to do certain things, that someone will continue to do them. That doesn't make Teddie, Yosuke, or anyone a bad person. That makes them nuanced characters. There's a lot of other scenes I could address, but ultimately it all boils down to the fact that he doesn't know any better, and his friends haven't sat down to give him the talk about the birds and the bees. Most of what he does is a combination of wanting to fit in, wanting to have fun, and wanting to bond with others. However, his perception of the human world has been influenced by teenagers who haven't figured everything out, and what Teddie sees from the shadow selves that have emerged. On top of that, his sense of humor isn't limited to making bad puns. It's actually pretty clever in the Japanese version. Although, with all that he does over the course of the game, one would think that he serves no purpose other than comic relief, and that he doesn't play a significant role in the investigation team or plot. But that's not true at all. In order to understand Teddie's impact on the overall plot and characters, his character arc must be examined. Teddie's character arc in Persona 4 is intertwined with the cast of the investigation team, and he plays a vital role in many ways. Right from the start, Teddie makes himself useful by creating an exit from the TV world to let the others out. I don't need to explain how this is useful for the investigation team, but I can explain that Teddie makes glasses for everyone so they can see in the TV world. The glasses serve as a metaphor for seeking out the truth amidst the fog of lies, and also serves as a literal tool for them to use for their adventures in the TV world. Then, up until Rise joins in, Teddie serves as the navigator of the group, finding the victims that were thrown in the TV world and memorizing elemental affinities of enemies. Already this shows how lost the team would be without Teddie, and how important he is for the plot to progress. So how about his character arc? What does that have to do with his connection with the investigation team? This is where things get interesting. While in the English version, he says his name is Teddie, in the Japanese version, Teddie just says his name is Kuma, or the Japanese word for bear. This may not seem like an important detail, but it actually shows how his identity is tied very closely to the investigation team. Up until that point, Teddie didn't even have a name. In the Japanese version, when Yosuke asks him what his name is, Teddie responds with his Kuma verbal tick. That's when Yosuke just calls him Kuma and gives him a name to go by. See? I told you the verbal tick is important. The fact that in the English version he already named himself Teddie is a contradiction to his identity arc, but for the sake of this video, and the fact that it's too ingrained into my mind at this point, I'm just going to keep calling him Teddie. After the fight against Shadow Yosuke, Teddie begins questioning who he is and where he came from, and that's when his arc truly starts.
Can I ask something too? If shadows are born from humans, what was Teddie born from?
You don't even know where you came from? How should we know?
I know some things, mostly about this world, but I don't know anything about myself. To be honest, I never thought about it until now.
This is why his identity is so closely tied to the team. Until Teddie met them, he never thought about who he was. Every time you visit him as the plot demands it, Teddie mentions that he's been thinking about himself, but can't come up with an answer. You can tell it's been eating at him with each passing day. His confusion about himself reaches its peak when Rise needs to be rescued. Coincidentally, this is when Teddie's social link starts. There's two interesting things about this. One is that Teddie's arcana here is the Star Arcana. The general interpretation of the Star Arcana represents two things depending on if it's upright or reversed. We'll use the definition of labyrinthos.co as our baseline of what it means. Upright, it represents hope, inspiration, positivity, faith, renewal, healing, and rejuvenation. Reversed, it represents hopelessness, despair, negativity, lack of faith, and despondent. Keep this in mind as we go along. The other thing that's interesting is Teddie's social link is one of the few links where it automatically ranks up as the story progresses, once again tying into the theme of Teddie's arc being intertwined with the cast. The instance that truly shows this is when Teddie's sheer willpower to support his friends and vice versa allows him to temporarily suppress his shadow self and develop a persona. His awakening, however, doesn't go the same way as others do. To rewind a bit here, Rise confronts her shadow and says there is no real Rise. This is when Teddie's own shadow spawns and says this.
It is those efforts that I am calling useless. You are hollow, empty. At your core, you know this. You just cannot accept it. So you seek an alternate form, a denial of your nature. You have no lost memories. If you have forgotten anything, it is this truth.
That's a lie!
The dialogue here implies that Teddie has no lost memories and that he's choosing to forget who he is at his core. That's not entirely true. If you take a look after the Shadow Teddie fight, note that the awakening doesn't use the same line as everyone else. This line is different from the others for a reason. Teddie hasn't truly faced himself at this point yet. When he says he doesn't know who he is, he means it. This is an important detail that makes a difference between willful ignorance and actual amnesia. It's not the typical kind of amnesia, however. What's happening here is that Teddie has a case of dissociative amnesia. According to the National Institutes of Health, dissociative amnesia is a disorder characterized by retrospectively reported memory gaps. These gaps involve an inability to recall personal information, usually of a traumatic or stressful nature. In other words, it's not that he doesn't want to face himself, it's that he can't. The memory of who he is too traumatic and painful to think about, and could induce a lot of stress if he did, which is why his shadow spawned in the first place. We'll talk more about his dissociative amnesia later, as this will come into play the deeper we go into his arc. After all this, Teddie grows a human body inside of himself, plays around a bunch in the human world, and lives like he's in paradise. The reason why I'm not going deep into what happens here is because for the most part, nothing significant happens or changes about Teddie's character. He learns that he knows nothing about himself, that he's hollow inside, and that anytime Teddie thinks about who he is, he pushes those thoughts out and continues playing around with his friends. This is Teddie at his most naive and optimistic state. He's soaking in everything as if it's all one big playground to him, and that's because he has a warped perception of the human world. Remember, his knowledge of the human world is a mix of what he knows from the TV world, what his friends have been doing, and living with Yosuke for months. Because of his blind optimism about the human world, he thinks nothing can go wrong with all the fun he's been having. But as we all know, reality is often cruel at times, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I mentioned before that Teddie represents the Star Arcana, which matches the theme of his character arc being so blindly happy with everything that's been happening. But that also means he represents the reverse of all that.
I was always watching over Nana-chan, and I still couldn't save her. It happened in my world. Even though I was the only Teddie in that place, I still couldn't do anything.
Being forced to confront Nanako's death at the time caused everything he knew about himself and the human world to come crumbling down. This is Teddie at his most hopeless state. Everything he and everyone else did to save Nanako, it was all for nothing. Even if he didn't realize it himself at the time, that's why he disappears from the human world. Because he failed to keep his promise, there's no point in staying around any longer. However, it's at this lowest point in time that he remembers who he is.
I really am stupid. What the other Teddie said before, in the end, it was all true. No matter how much I search for myself, I have no self. there was no me to begin with. I'm just a shadow that took a different form so humans would like me. It would have been better if I had never remembered, but I did.
With this revelation, everything comes together about who he is. Do you recall the dissociative amnesia that I mentioned he has? Every time he thinks about who he is, it hurts him deep down, but he doesn't know why. In every instance where he's been exploring himself, he's been doubling down on his behavior of having as much fun as possible. And this is due to the fact that the truth that he's merely a shadow is just that painful for him. So instead of thinking too much about it, he decides it's better to goof off and have fun. This is why everything he's done until now has been all fun and games to him. He's been trying to suppress the possibility that he's a shadow. Shadows are made of human emotion and go berserk when they get agitated. To think that he's just one of them is not only painful for Teddie to consider, it's traumatizing to him. He wants to be loved, but shadows aren't loved. Shadows aren't a part of the human world. They're tangible forms of primarily negative human emotions, serving as the enemies Teddie and his friends have been defeating. So he locked up that idea as a traumatic memory so he could live happily among others. This is why in the bad endings, he leaves a letter behind.
I'm going back to my own world. It's not easy to live there now, but it's my reality. I'm really, really thankful for everything all of you did for me. Well, goodbye.
Here, he's not only given up on himself, but he's given up on living with the others. The note sounds eerily similar to a certain kind of note, which implies he reverted back to a regular shadow after this. This shows Teddie at his most nihilistic, giving up on everything. Nothing matters anymore, because his promise was broken. Why stay around and continue living here? After all, shadows have no place in the human world, and that's all he is in his mind. No resolution to his arc, no compromise with his friends. He determined this himself after being forced to confront the loss of Nanako. That, at his core, he is just a shadow. He is nothing. Or at least, that's what he believes he is.
Teddie? It is you, Teddie. I heard your voice. You said, hang in there. I heard my big bro and everyone else too.
Teddie isn't just hopeful in a sense where he's optimistic. He instills hope into others because of who he is. I've been explaining what Teddie's arc is about up until this point, and if there's one thing I haven't talked about, it's how the investigation team feels about Teddie. If one thinks that they won't miss him if he were to disappear, that thought is surely mistaken, because he did disappear, and they went out of their way to look for him.
Teddie's missing. I looked all over the neighborhood, but I couldn't find him anywhere.
It's no use, man. We can't find him.
No luck for me either. I didn't sense anything over there. The fog's so dense it might be affecting my readings. I wish I could do better. I'm sorry.
Ted. Don't tell me he really went back to his world this time. We told him over and over that he could stay here.
Rise even continued to search for him while they were looking for clues on who the real killer is.
I asked around about Teddie too, but no one's seen him. Gee, I wonder where he could have gone.
They eventually figured out who the killer is, but even when they were searching for the killer in the TV world, they didn't stop thinking about Teddie.
If only Teddie was with us.
Didn't he say his nose is practically useless now? And could he even help us find that bastard?
Nope. He'd be no help at all, but he was always there to support me whenever.
That bear's a loudmouth, but he's nice to have around. He's always so full of energy.
He's lighthearted and always optimistic.
When he did come back, they welcomed him with open arms. Rise even hugged him and cried.
You idiot! Bad bear! Bad! You're so late! Who do you think you are?
Rise-chan? Are you faking?
No, stupid!
So it's safe to say, they definitely miss him. After everything he's been through, what's the conclusion of his arc? Teddie learns the importance of the truth, and how his truth doesn't stop him from being who he is. He can change and do things, so why not go out there and continue to be something for others? It's thanks to Yu's support that Teddie comes back and evolves into a better person. After he comes back, Teddie tells the truth about himself to his friends, and his friends accept him for who he is. They actually say he's no different from a human, as a matter of fact, so as it turns out, his worries over being a shadow were from his deeply rooted nihilism that came when his feelings first emerged from meeting them. See how his identity is so closely linked to his friends? Without Teddie, his friends would be lost and hopeless, and Teddie, without his friends, would be another shadow wandering the TV world. And it's because of this reassurance and morale boost that Teddie is here now, and was able to find the real killer in the TV world, further cementing his status as Hope Incarnate. His story is similar to a shooting star in a way, and it's kind of poetic. So what's the point in explaining all of this? The point is to showcase exactly how Teddie is a unique character unlike any other in the Persona games. He's a character worth defending and having worthwhile discussions about. One can view discussions about Yosuke, Kanji, Naoto, and many of the other characters in Persona and how discussions about them are so heavily divisive. But those conversations, whether we intend it or not, come from passion and love for the characters or the game. I don't see anything like that for Teddie. Teddie has this consensus that he's just a pervert, a mascot character without purpose or meaning, and that his inclusion heavily dampens the mood of Persona 4, when that's not the case at all. He adds so much to the game with his unique writing that only a character like Teddie could bring to the plot, and enhances the idea of seeking out the truth and knowing there's good truths and bad truths. It's a matter of what you do with that truth that defines who you are. That's what he and the others have learned over the game, and how Teddie represents that the best out of all the characters. But never have I ever seen such vitriol directed towards a character because of what he shows at surface level. It's as if there's no attempt at dissecting his character at his core and seeing him for what he truly is, a complex yet loving individual that wants friends. You're entitled to feel about Teddie however you like. This video was meant to show you more behind the mask, that Teddie is not a pervert or malicious mascot. Teddie is childish, but also naive. Teddie is flirtatious, but also caring. Teddie is nihilistic, yet optimistic. Teddie is the most misunderstood Persona character.